This is God.
Don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos or create God!
Because you were home.
Welcome back to the 2023 Halloween Spooktacular. Hope you guys have had a great time watching my horror movie reviews. Today I'm actually going to be talking about a Friday the 13th movie, and usually with movie series like this in October, I like to start at the beginning, but I'm actually not going to start at the beginning here. I'm going to start with the last one. I'm going to be reviewing the remake of Friday the 13th. This is actually a special horror movie for me because this came out in 2009, and it was at that time for me where I was a freshman in high school. I wasn't sure if like how horror movies really played out. Like I never watched them really, but I remember popping this on one Halloween with my mom. My mom and I watched it, and she was like, I'm surprised she watched it because she's not a big horror fan at all. And we watched it on Halloween as we were giving out like candy to people. I'll tell you what, the kids coming to the door during the sex scenes in this movie was we had to press pause real quick. But it was at that time where I didn't watch horror movies. For me, this was more like, is this scary? Is it not scary? That's kind of how my mindset was with horror at the time, because well, I looked at horror as if it's not scary, then it's gross. You know, and my cousin Pat, who's been on the channel a lot, had seen this before I did and said it was more bloody than scary. So I was like, okay, I guess maybe I can handle it, but it might be gross. It's okay. This also came out at a time where like where I say the big three slasher franchises, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. This was at a time where the remakes for those were big. Like Halloween's remake came out in 2007. This came out in 2009. The remake for Nightmare on Elm Street came out in 2010. You also had the remake of My Bloody Valentine come out in 2009. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute, not review it, but, you know, in the context of this, because this movie, Friday the 13th, 09, stars Jared Padalecki. That movie stars Jensen Ackles. And what were they big in at the time? Supernatural. This movie is okay. I don't think it's as bad as critics say it is. When people complain about it being a porno released to theaters, I mean, yeah, I totally see that. I call it the 4 Bs. Booze, boobs, bongs, and booties. I don't know. I just think some of it may have been a mistake to combine elements from the first 4, because there are parts of this movie that feel remake-ish of the first 4. It just seemed like the writers of this movie took what they thought were the best parts of parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just combined everything into this movie. For instance, you see Pamela Voorhees die at the beginning of this movie during the credits, and then Jason has the burlap sack like he does in Friday the 13th Part 2. He gets you see the origin of where the hockey mask comes from, Friday the 13th Part 3. There's probably something with Part 4. I don't really remember Part 4. So he also keeps the skeleton of his mother in like part of his bedroom. Whitney and her boyfriend are like investigating late at night an old cabin which was probably Pamela Voorhees' house at Camp Crystal Lake, and he reaches into the wall and he pulls out Pamela Voorhees' skull. That's very similar to the ending of Part 2 with the skull there. I remember that ending creeped me out for Part 2. But this is fine. But I think it's better than most critics say it is. I don't want to say it's a great Friday the 13th movie. I don't even want to say it's a good Friday the 13th movie. But compared to some of the shit you get later on in the series, this is much, much better than that. The thing I like about this is that Jason isn't necessarily out for revenge. He's just more necessarily killing them because they're invading his territory. He's very territorial in this, and that's what I like about Jason, this movie. He was kind of reimagined to be like that. Whether or not he's a supernatural force, I don't think we'll ever find out with this cast or in this same continuity, since this is a reboot and they never got a sequel when it was supposed to. But I've always found it interesting that he's very territorial and he's a killer, but when he sees somebody that resembles his mother, he keeps them alive, like he does with Whitney, who strikes a very bearing resemblance to his mother. And he's got all the tunnels and stuff. I think that stuff is actually handled really well. All the Jason stuff is really, really good in this movie. Jared Padalecki is a bit distracting. I think he's kind of wooden in this movie, honestly. His character's fine for what the movie is going for. I just think it's the performance and the fact that he's in Supernatural. And then you have My Bloody Valentine that came out in 09 as well with Jensen Ackles. when you take the two of them out of Supernatural and you put them in horror movies, obviously Jensen Ackles ended up being the killer Harry Warden in My Bloody Valentine. So this argument doesn't really apply there. This applies more for Jared Padalecki in this movie. But you take him out of Supernatural and you put him in this, it's like really distracting because it's just like, dude, just go to the Impala, get rock salt, shotgun his ass, gank the bitch, So it's like, it's distracting when you're seeing him not using the tools at his disposal, but it's like, no, it's a completely different character. But it is distracting knowing that both him and Jensen were in horror movies in 2009 while they were on Supernatural. So they must have just needed a quick paycheck while they were on break. I do think my favorite character in the movie is definitely Jenna, played by Danielle Panabaker. She's like the one who's the most reasonable and like the most relatable. She doesn't have a character, honestly. She's just the dickhead dude from Transformers' girlfriend. She's like the nice girl, So I like her a lot. And Clay Miller, Jared Padalecki's character, is okay as a character. I like that he's at Crystal Lake to investigate the disappearance of his sister, because Whitney's his sister. You learn a little bit that like he was a little estranged from his sister because he didn't attend their mother's funeral. She died of cancer. So you get a little bit of background. It's a little bit more than what most horror remakes give you. And I can appreciate that. But again, the best parts of this movie are Jason. He's a killing machine in this movie, territorial, very protective of what he thinks is his. I think he's got some good kills in this movie. When he kills Chewie with the screwdriver, that's a really good kill. He cooks the chick at the beginning over a fire while she's in a sleeping bag. I'm like, okay, that's brutal. There's memorable kills in this movie. This movie, as I said, is just a porno released to theaters. It's like the most stereotypical, these are horny teenagers and they're all gonna fuck or get naked at some point in the movie. Of course, it's produced by Michael Bay and he's got like supermodels in here as half of those naked girls. And it's the most stereotypical thing. It's sexual references, it's naked girls, it's dudes smoking weed. The first group of friends that gets killed by Jason in the movie, the only thing they talk about is how much profit they're gonna make off of selling weed. Look, I got nothing against it, but like, Jesus, can we talk about something else? This is like time wasting dialogue. It's so stereotypical of like, you have to have the stoner dude, you have to have the asshat dickhead boyfriend dude. That's a trope that like every 2000s horror movie fell into, and I think we're getting out of it, because nowadays they've realized that horror movies just can't have like stereotypical stuff like that, and you have to actually develop characters and actually develop lore behind what you want to try and do with your story. It's just hard to do some of that, I think, with big franchises like this. But I think it can be done. And I think a little bit more could have been done. They didn't have to make it so stereotypical. What if it was essentially that game, The Quarry? You remember that game that came out last year? What if it was just that? Like, what if that was a Friday the 13th game? A movie that you play? Like that? What if that was this movie? That would have been great. But just sub out the werewolves for Jason. That would have been a great Friday the 13th movie. That's really all you need. Out of the three big ones, between this, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, I think this is the best remake out of them. Like I said, I don't think this is a good movie. My letterbox might say otherwise, because I think I have it at a 2, but I mean, considering what comes after Friday the 13th Part 6, and to this point, other than Freddy vs. Jason, this is the best one other than Freddy vs. Jason, in between 6 and Freddy vs. Jason. I'm going to give Friday the 13th, 2009, C. It's fine. I mean, it's one where it's like, yeah, if I want to watch it, I'll pop it on. Like, this is one that I think is watchable. As stereotypical as it is, I get a kick out of watching Jason just be so territorial and protective of what he thinks is his on Crystal Lake, and just taking out asshole characters and dumb characters like this. Everybody's expendable. And then you have a couple characters that you like, or you're like, yeah, do that. So again, not the best Friday the 13th movie, certainly not the worst, like I think some people treat it as. Definitely the best of those 2000s remakes / reboots. So what do you guys think of the 2009 Friday the 13th? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere.